an election year guaranteed to divide us.
This is a debacle.
Finally, a second term we can all agree on.
Yes!
Comedy Central's The Daily Show. Mondays with Jon Stewart. Tonight at 11, 10 Central on Comedy Central. And next day on Paramount+.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, how much do you make a year? Now, how much do you spend a year? When we talk about state budgets, it can be hard to think about them in real terms, which is why we are phoning a friend. Today, we're with friend of the pod, Stephen Caruso, to talk about the governor's new budget proposal worth a staggering $48.3 billion. It's Monday, February 12th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Hey, Stephen. Welcome back to CityCast Pittsburgh.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me. Friend of a pod. It feels like an upgrade.
Yeah. I think you qualify. You've been on a few times. And CityCast Philly, which is great. I love that you're getting love on both sides of the state.
I love the whole Commonwealth. What can I say?
So you cover the Capitol for Spotlight PA, and of course you attended the budget address last week. If you had to pick like one line that sums up Governor Josh Shapiro's approach to this whole budget thing, what do you think it would be?
Well, there's an obvious answer, which is his refrain of get shit done. I can't remember how he put it, but there's no honor in saving money when we're sitting on $14 billion.
Yeah. He had a long wish list this year. For folks who aren't Capitol watchers, can you kind of give us like a top level summary, like what this thing covers, how it works, when it gets done, ideally?
Yeah. So the governor just delivered his budget address on Tuesday. That's his opening offer. And like any good negotiation, you make a big offer at the start and you see what the other people say. The governor is dealing with a Democratic House and a Republican Senate. So both parties are going to have a say. I think it's also fair to note that just, what Josh Shapiro says and what House Democrats are going to want and vice versa. But, they're on the same team. Now what's going to happen is there's going to be budget hearings where both of the House and Senate are going to say what they like about this. They're going to, say what they don't like about this. They're going to posture and preem and just talk about everything. And then that will be joined by private backdoor conversations that I won't be privy to, and only a handful of people will be privy to, that will go on basically all the way until June. We'll be lucky to hear anything until maybe like late May, early June, and then at the last minute, a budget plan usually bursts forth like Athena from Zeus's forehead, and maybe we'll get something, or maybe they'll just blow past the deadline because no one can agree to anything. But they need it done by June 30th.
June 30th is always the goal. I feel like Pennsylvania very rarely meets the goal.
Yeah, no, they've been getting better. We had a ton of budget impasses in Tom Wolf's first term. They got better because there was money coming in, but now we're starting to get back to not a lot of money's coming in, and there's a lot of needs.
Let's talk about some of that money, $48+ billion. Governor Shapiro talked a lot about all of the money he's going to spend. I was kind of blown away listening to the whole thing. It's like an hour and 40 minutes total, but not a ton about how he's going to pay for it. What's your take? Like, can we actually do some of this stuff? I know we have a surplus. Like, that's good. But is it enough for like several years in a row?
You hit on the exact right question there. There is enough for what Shapiro is proposing for this year. I think there's no way to debate that. The state is sitting on $14 billion right now. This has been built up basically since 2020. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Imagine you looked at your bank account and saw that. But yeah, the state is sitting on $14 billion. And that has been built up over the course of the pandemic because of enhanced federal aid to states. Yeah. And also the fact that more tax revenue is coming in from people spending way more money than anyone expected due to the stimulus checks. So that meant the state has a nest egg. Mm-hmm. The issue is more of, this is like our savings account. It's not getting replenished every year. Our revenues right now are right on target with what we thought. So you can put down, $2 billion new dollars in education like the governor wants this year. But can you do it the year after that? Can you do it the year after that? Can you do it the year after that? And that's what schools need. And we can get more into the politics and the policy behind that. But that's kind of what we're dealing with. Like, could we afford the governor's plan in 2024? Yes. What about 2025? What about 2026? What about 2027? I'm going to shake my magic 8 ball and say outcome looks unlikely.
I mean, if we didn't spend any new money, like if this whole wish list just didn't happen and we just kind of stayed the course, when would we spend down that $14 billion? Does anybody know?
If you had no new spending, it probably would have lasted a little bit longer, but eventually you're going to spend that down. I mean, the problem is the Commonwealth just kind of has a structural deficit. We don't bring in as much revenue as we need to cover our costs. And that's just because of like lots of spending on programs for the elderly, for our aging population, Medicaid, like these things that we have to pay for. And I want to give credit to the point that Democrats have been making, House Democrats and now Josh Shapiro, is that, if we spend smart, if we spend on making our education system better, making our higher education system better, on, transit, on this, on that, you might keep people here and we'll expand our tax base and we'll, draw more business here. That's the goal. It's kind of Keynesianism 101, spend money to make money. That just runs up against Republicans who look ahead and their goal is always to keep spending down because they don't want to have to deal with the political consequences of supporting a tax hike or deal with the political consequences of cutting spending on necessary programs. Because there's not a lot of, there's a lot of stuff in the budget. Is there fat that could be trimmed? Maybe, but fat to be trimmed for one person is another group's
vital service.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of that wish list, how in the intervening days maybe have folks received the budget? Because, there's the fanfare on the day, lots of applause, lots of like self-congratulation. Like it's like a State of the Union on the federal level, if you've ever watched one of those. But that doesn't mean people have been talking nice about it after the fact.
I mean, look, I would say it's been about what you'd expect. I can't speak for every advocacy group under the sun, but I can tell you in the Capitol, legislative Democrats loved it. They called it bold. They said it was a spending plan they could get behind. I think I note that in particular because last year, Shapiro didn't mention his budget address, but the budget negotiations were basically blown up because he, at the last minute, backed school vouchers. So that's public money for kids to go to private schools. And that's right.
Yeah. And that was wildly unpopular.
Wildly unpopular with legislative Democrats, at least. I can't speak for the statewide polling.
Yeah, his own party, that was the unique thing, is that his own party was very upset about it.
Correct. Yeah. And so that blew up everything. And then he had to backtrack. And then we ended up with not a budget until December. So compared to last year, this year, Democrats loved it in particular.
And Republicans
this year are, I think, Senate President pro tempore Kim Ward, the top Republican in the state Senate. She even said, well, last year looks kind of moderate, but this year just looks like I think she called it an audition for his DNC speech, which, I think maybe hit the nail on the head a little bit too much.
I mean, it's not low key. It's like a straight up way of accusing someone of having an office to run for a bigger one.
I got nothing. But I will simply say, too, Kim Ward also said that, the budget was rainbows and unicorns. They brought up issues with just the total spending. Because, basically, we said there's $14 billion. Shapiro has admitted he needs to spend down some of that to balance his budget and get the new programs out. That'd leave the state with $11 billion, which is still a lot of money. But as we noted, you keep going forward with these programs, year after year after year. We're also trying to increase education spending and fund everything he wants to do. That $11 billion is going to go real, real fast.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
So let's get into some of Josh Shapiro's specific priorities. He talked a lot about social spending. from your vantage point, what is he like most excited to maybe spend money on in the next year?
I mean, the place you have to start is education spending, particularly K through 12 education spending. A year ago, almost exactly, a state appeals court ruled that Pennsylvania was unconstitutionally underfunding poor school districts. These are rural districts, urban districts all across the state that basically just weren't getting enough dollars from the state to afford to give kids the education that they deserve under the state constitution, which mandates that they have an efficient education. So, fixing that issue is very much an item of debate. The court ruling itself was kind of quiet on if you do that through more funding or if you do that through reforms. It said that, I believe, to quote verbatim, the possibilities are nearly endless.
Yeah. They ordered that we needed to fix it, but not how we had to do it.
Exactly. What a great ruling. But this is something that I think everybody has agreed needs to be done. This is an issue that everybody wants to talk about. Education is our future. Education is our children. Democrats have focused on putting more money into education. Republicans have focused on systemic changes to the education system. Shapiro came out in this budget address and basically sided hard with let's spend more money. He proposed about $1 billion directly to school districts. Mm-hmm. That money the lion's share of it, about almost 870 million of those dollars, would go to school districts that are not adequately funded. He left how to define that up to the legislature. So I'm sorry to say I only have really questions to give your listeners rather than answers. But The general idea is that's money that's earmarked for the districts that are struggling right now, as the Commonwealth Court put it. And then also, though, there's more that is in this budget for mental health, to get let out of schools, for school safety. There's even an allocation. It's a very small one in the grand scheme of things, but to provide free menstrual products to students as long as they're in schools.
Yeah, there was a huge section of like extra add-ons. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to phrase it, of like construction, security, safety, teacher recruitment, stipends for student teachers. It was just like a lot of things lumped into one big sum.
Mm-hmm. And look, I think that is all part of the equation. If you look at, so as I said, there was this court ruling. The legislature then basically set up a commission of lawmakers to study this issue, hold hearings across the state, and write a final report. That report was released along near party lines in last month, and it was approved by Shapiro's own administration officials who sat on the commission. And it mentioned, it put this hard number of $5.4 billion going directly to poor school districts. But that was on top of a bunch of numbers that, it just kind of threw out. That we need to work on teacher recruitment. We need to provide more wraparound services to students. We need to get let out of schools. We need to also help, schools build new schools. If some schools are school buildings might have been built during the Great Depression. So
or the one that's been making headlines lately is just all these schools in Pennsylvania that weren't built with air conditioners because that didn't used to be so necessary, and now it is.
Exactly. So all of this adds up. There's no way around it. And especially to meet the needs of this court ruling and to make the vision of public education that Democrats see, it's gonna cost money. And, we haven't even gotten into higher education. This is all K through 12.
Yeah, higher ed, he had this whole 3-part plan. As briefly as you can you kind of walk us through that?
Basically, it's combine our state system, the PASHE schools with the community colleges under a central governance structure, make them cooperate more, make them cooperate with workforce development, lower their costs, provide more money for scholarships so that in-state students under a certain household income get tuition for just $1,000 a year. And then also
$1,000 a semester.
Excuse me, thank you. $1,000 a semester. And then there's also this element we have the state-related schools you maybe have heard me talk about on previous podcasts. They're political football. He wants to get rid of that by only giving the 4 state-related, Pitt, Penn State, Lincoln, and Temple, their dollars through a formula that looks at their performance, how well they're giving out degrees and such. So all of that combined is his higher ed plan. That'll cost, I believe, about $450 million total. So that's on top of the $1.8 million that he wants to give to K through 12. It's a lot of money. It adds up quickly. You can see why I'm focusing on maybe we can afford this year, but what do you do in the subsequent years?
Well, it also seems like the kind of thing that would require a whole lot of consensus to get all of those things. Like even just the first part, combining the PASHE system with community colleges. Like, do they want that? Do they want to be on the same team?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Every budget negotiation requires getting a lot of people on board with you. So far, I think I've mostly seen positive comments from everyone that are willing to have the conversation. But the devil is always in the details. Whether it's going to be this higher ed plan, this education plan, his plan for public transit, his plan for insurance, his plans for housing, all of them. I mean, that's what a budget is. It's consensus building. And, right now, I think there's a lot of people who want to listen, but the magic is how you get to June 30th and get everyone to vote for it.
Totally. And then I think maybe among the more pie in the sky ideals on Shapiro's wish list, raising the minimum wage to $15 and legalizing recreational cannabis. What are the odds of either?
Yeah, look, that all comes down to compromise. And as your listeners might know from having listened to me yap previously, the General Assembly occasionally has had trouble coming to compromise. That's why we had a budget impasse. They did come to a conclusion, though. Took them 6 months, but they did. I say all of that, can everyone come to an agreement? Minimum wage, this Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman has said, we're willing to compromise on this. It just has to be the right number.
That sounds like maybe we'll come up, but it ain't going to be 15.
I think that's a good read. I mean, I'll also tell you, Democrats say, well, they want to compromise. Well, if they say they want to compromise, then they should come to us with a compromise. It's kind of at the schoolyard. You won't do it. Yeah, no, you won't do it. Yeah, you won't do it. That's kind of where we're at a little bit. And so minimum wage, I'll believe it when I hear chatter about it. And when it comes to legalizing marijuana, same thing. That's been an issue that's been talked about for decades. In particular, recently, now Senator John Fetterman championed it when he was the lieutenant governor. There've
been so many surveys and other things polling the Pennsylvania populace, asking would you be okay with this? No, granted, done by parties that want to see it done, but overwhelmingly, the state of Pennsylvania, at least the voters, are in favor of it.
Yeah, it is popular nationally. It's popular in Pennsylvania. But, same thing. Getting to consensus is hard. I mean, I will say this is an issue that has a lot of stakeholders, to use the Harrisburg parlance. So, look, you got a cannabis industry that's already here. We've had legalized medical marijuana since 2016. Consumers are going to want to have a say. Law enforcement's going to want to have a say. It's also very important for the Democrats to control the state house that any legalization bill has equity provisions built in, expunging the records of folks who, have a marijuana conviction on their record, or, making sure that the industry is open to folks who want to join it if they're from a black community, a brown community, and, maybe, and that they have an opportunity to get in. It isn't just a monopoly. So that's a lot of balancing you have to do. Shapiro pitched it to try and get the hope is $250 million in tax revenue once the industry's really going.
Because that's the linchpin here is that we're not just saying we want to do it for the heck of it. We're saying we want to do it because we want to tax it and use that to fund all these programs we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's important to note, the $250 million. If listeners will probably closely notice that we've been talking in the billions with B when it comes to education spending, and that's to be sustained versus $250 million a year for weed.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that struck me just in listening to the address is that he didn't actually outline a plan in in those terms. It seemed like it was more I want to tell you that I want this done. And then the budget itself actually assumes that it is by January of 2025. And Pennsylvania just doesn't move that fast. Or does it? Is this possible?
Well, remember what I said about budget deadlines. They act like college kids. They cram at the very last minute and then give us something. So I would say what I'm preparing for is either them to do nothing because they flail past the deadline like they did last year or they have in previous years, or I will be up on June 29th at about 1 a.m. trying to quickly read a 300-page legalization bill. And if that happens, you can save that audio because I will have called it.
So this budget address is just sort of the beginning of the conversation. The deadline is, of course, June 30th. Stephen, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we'll be watching your work.
Thank you. I'm happy to talk about it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you're liking what you hear, please let us know. You can always call us, leave us a voicemail. We're never going to pick up at 412-212-8893, or you can text us. You can also become a member of CityCast Pittsburgh. Give us a try. We're membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. Yeah, I mean, 11 billion sounds like a lot of money to say that it can go really fast. You know what I mean?
Look, man, state governments just operate on a different level than us. They're built different.